Welcome to Energy Stew. This is Peter Roth, your host. And I'd like to ask you, when or if or how have you lost faith in life? At some point, I think we all lose faith, often as kids, when our parents are reprimanding us. It's one way to lose faith. But as adults, it's not so nice. And an author who has been on my show a number of times has written a blog about losing faith. And I was so intrigued by it that I asked him to be a guest on Energy Stew again. Jerry Kantor, welcome back to Energy Stew.
Thank you, Peter. Pleasure to be here.
Well, this is, it's a fascinating subject because I think even the audience right now is thinking about what losing faith has meant to them in their lives or family and et cetera. What have you learned about it?
Well, I'm a homeopath, and that is one thing. One interesting thing about that is that is not a customary rubric in homeopathy. When we take someone's case, we reduce their symptoms, their behaviors, their quirks into what we call rubrics, which reference an emotion or a reaction or a symptom back to a number of remedies, and then we decide which of the remedies connects the dots for that client, and that would be the remedy that we use. But loss of faith does not appear as a rubric. So in place of that, what I was writing about was the rubrics that we do use that would appear in a homeopathic repertory. And those are words like humiliation, embarrassment, mortification, and chagrin. And all of those reflect some aspect of loss of faith. Loss of faith is it's very interesting because why that doesn't appear directly in the West. Well, because anyway, the point is it can be broken down into words like that I've come up with, and they're subtly different. It's subtly different to be humiliated as opposed to embarrassed and mortified and experience chagrin. They're all subtly different.
Right, and that's why I guess it's the way we're built to respond to losing faith. We have, some of us are more extreme about it. Some of us can brush it off, and so there are different personalities involved in this.
Yeah. Or you're a generic person and you're insulted, there would be no internal reaction to it. You would simply repudiate it. You'd get angry and you would repudiate it. There would be not necessarily a loss of faith to being insulted. Loss of faith occurs when something harms your integrity or your social standing, or something that you're part. Well, you could be a part of your family, or as I say, your social standing. There's something internal, that some kind of internal wound takes place that involves your status as a human being. And then part of your loss of faith, it can, if it's embarrassment, you feel two separate ways, right? You get red in the face, but you can't say anything. That means that you're conflicted in some kind of way. You recognize your psyche is recognizing the impact of the insult, but it's not proper for you for some reason to respond, so you become embarrassed. Mortification is, I think, the same thing, but more severe. And chagrin indicates that you have a strong sense, something kind of regret about what's happened. You're regretting some way in which you might have invited this. To be humiliated leaves you with no regress. It means that someone has actually lowered the boom on you, made you look ridiculous, harmed you in some way in which you simply are powerless to respond. So all these things come under the general umbrella of loss of faith.
And I like what you said about that it's really not the incident that happens so much as how we feel about it. So it takes two to tango.
Absolutely. No, it's a very social a very social kind of a wound.
Yeah, and yeah, but it's how we feel about our social status, standing,
Yeah,
comfort
yeah,
level, um, and often, I mean, families use it a lot. I remember that when my kids were teenagers, we were learning, we took a workshop, and how do you punish teenagers for misbehavior? And we were told that, it's really, at some point, punishing them isn't the answer. Uh, the answer is making them feel bad. And that's humiliation. So to treat teenagers so they feel a loss of face is probably, the most powerful way, and maybe the most harmless way, really, of of uh, fighting back against teen misbehavior.
what would be an example of what you'd want to punish Peter? Can you give me an example of that?
Well, I mean, punishment would be,
No, I
to
mean, what would the egress be? What would that
oh,
matters to me.
it could be so many different things, um, just misobeying rules, misobeying, uh,
Yeah.
what we expect of them, and even what they might have agreed to, and then they break those rules.
Yeah, if you got a teenager who has a drunken party and you want to rein that in, you sort of have to depend on the teenager's relationship to you and the integrity of the family. You would say, this has been we are very, very disappointed in you. You know, we didn't think we thought of you very differently. This is, yeah, and that could create a loss of faith that I would call chagrin in the child if he has a if the respect of his parents is important to him. It would depend on that. So all these contexts to this.
Right, and it's interesting because I have one son who, as a teenager, and we'd go away for a weekend, and we'd come back and the house would look nice, and we'd say, "Well, I guess he behaved," but it turned out that he had parties and knew how to clean up after himself, and made friends with the doorman of our building so that he wouldn't tell on him.
That's funny.
So,
That's funny.
yeah, he knew how to manage us. So, but actually, it's interesting because um, I had a talk with my son not long ago, and just telling him how highly I respect him, and he told me how much that meant to him. It's huge.
Yeah. Anyway, I find in terms of fleshing this discussion out, that actual homeopathic remedies really give a very good window into this issue and all the differences. For example, the remedy nausea, which is made from the venom of the Indian cobra. I used to think that this could be the national remedy for Japan because the situation where people commit suicide, seppuku, ritual suicide, over loss of face, specifically where they're responsible for something, they feel responsible for something that they didn't necessarily personally do. So what I meant by context earlier. In the Japanese society, it's not so much the cult of the individual as it is in this country. You feel part of a fabric of the organization you work for. If your organization is responsible for some calamity, even though you personally had nothing to do with it, but people way down the line did, you might feel like you have to commit suicide in order to reestablish harmony. Here we would think that's nuts. This person did nothing. That's a hard price to pay, committing suicide. But it goes back to again context, the ethos of the samurai of that class, where loyalty was incredibly important, and the honor of the clan was incredibly important, and they lived by this very powerful ethos. So if something went wrong, and you had to repair the face of the clan, it was perfectly normal to commit seppuku. You had to do it. There's been less of that these days, but yeah, the remedy nausea comes up for people even when they're not Japanese, when they feel tremendous guilt about something, and they're really they're torn in half about it, even if it's not something that they personally didn't do. That's the number one remedy, connecting the dots between suicidality and guilt. And people who need that remedy feel their emotions very intensely. It's a wretched, wretched remedy state, but nausea gets them out of it.
Well,
So
I'm
that's
thinking in Asia, even the Middle East, there's a sense of honor uh, about women, and if a woman gets raped, she has just dishonored her family,
yeah,
and family has to reject her. And yet,
right. We have honor killings then.
yeah.
We have honor killings. I wrote that about that in the context of a different remedy called nitric acid, which is a very grudge-holding remedy, very bitter, very negative. And I think this remedy comes up if you were to put a remedy into the drinking water of a society, maybe like the Taliban, you could maybe obviate some of that. But it's places where a very rigid and fundamentalist ethos has taken place that completely overrides the humanity of the woman. So yeah, you have to go and well, yeah, you might kill the rapist. You might also, yeah, as you said, completely discard the woman over this issue of loss of face. And the remedy that comes up to mind is when I think about that situation is nitric acid. And anytime I give her an acid remedy, I always feel like something's eating you, you know, and that's the remedy, which is for someone who's sees the glass is half empty, who just cannot forgive something. It's an unforgiving remedy state. And there are many physical symptoms that come out when someone needs that remedy as well. So yeah, that's another loss of face remedy. Those are those involve very extreme situations. A less extreme one, which is very common, at least in the West, is the remedy state of staphysagria. This is for often comes up for women who simply cannot express anger. They suppress their indignation and they exude a very strong sense of dignity, of honor. They want to be above the fray. So yeah, if someone like that, it's very sensitive to rudeness, and will displace their anger. But they're very invested in dignity, the personal dignity. They do not want to get dragged down into a conflict. And so when you meet someone like that, you feel like they're preserving face, they're saving face at a very high cost.
Well,
A remedy where someone's very invested in their image, and I wrote about that one, is another remedy called calcarea silicata. The image is very important. So someone there with a slight, any kind of a slight to the family might have a devastating effect on somebody who needs calcarea silicata. And there's some peculiar things about that remedy state that you might not think play into loss of face, but someone like that would feel like they have, well, someone like that would have to uphold the standards of a family to the extent to which they talk to dead people in their family to get their reassurance that everything is all right. That's calcarea silicata.
that's fascinating. But I'm thinking that so much of what we're talking about, especially as we said earlier, that it takes two to tango, that it's really so much about self-love or not. And you probably see that in so many of your patients with so many different kinds of issues that reflect in their behavior in life. And when you look at it, the deeper you look at it, the more it's obvious this person just doesn't honor themselves enough.
Yeah, and where did that come from? Did they grow up being belittled and made fun of the whole time, or was it a situation where the standards of the family were so frighteningly high that they never could measure up? All these things can impact your sense of self-love. If you need, there's a remedy made from sugar. That's the number one remedy for someone who absolutely cannot love themselves. And these are people who are really addicted to sugar, who are extraordinarily affectionate, but really just cannot have no self-regard at all. But they'll steal candy, and if they're children, and they'll hide it. And sugar is used as a bribe. It's a very cheap substitute for love. Hey, sweetie. Hey, honey. When people don't feel love, they are attracted to that because they want that quick hit.
What is that remedy called?
That's called Saccharum officinale. Saccharum. You probably heard that sounds similar to saccharide. It is. It's just made from sugar.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, this idea of self-love. But I think someone like that, they're so deficient at the level of identity that I don't even think they have much face to preserve, to tell you the truth. They're not close to that yet. Their ego is too weak.
Yes, but I guess if somebody is addicted to sugar and you can give them a remedy, a sugar remedy, would that reduce their sugar craving?
Yes, but there's more than one remedy that craves, where the person craves sugar. That one is the most extreme one I just gave you an example of, because that has specifically this theme of not being able to love oneself. If you need a remedy like argentum nitricum, silver nitrate, you crave sugar, but the issue is different. It's nothing like that. These are people who are very suggestible and anxious, highly anxious, and they try to scoot past their anxieties. But they're also ambitious. They have a much stronger ego than someone who needs the remedy saccharum.
Well, maybe it's not. Maybe they don't have a strong ego, which is why they're so ambitious. Maybe they're trying to make up for a weak ego.
Oh, they're insecure for sure. But they have a weak ego. But it's the person who needs saccharum has basically no ego. It's been destroyed by the fact that they never got the love they needed. They got the phony version. They just got bribed.
Right. And ego has to do with willpower.
What's that?
Ego has to do with willpower. And
yeah, your sense of power comes from if you have a decent ego, then you're going to have a sense of will. You'll have a sense of what you want and what is good for you. Yeah. The saccharum person, I keep dwelling on that. It's usually a child. Although I've seen it in adults too. I mean, they don't feel entitled to anything, and they're deeply self-sabotaging. They're very inadequate people.
Wow, it's fascinating with the work you do, because it's so it takes so many considerations to work with any of your patients. You have to interview them at length and consider so many different ways that their behavior reflects a particular remedy.
That's right. But you get good at anything you do a lot of, and but you have to look at a person with a very wide angle lens and look at their physical symptoms, their proclivities, their behaviors, what they're like at their best, what they're like at their worst, any kind of formative event in their life which has been traumatic, what the legacy in their family is all about. It's cool work. It's really cool work. And
I'll say, because it's fascinating, because you're really climbing into the depths of someone's beingness in order to alter it.
yeah, it's objective, and the trick for the practitioner is not to become caught up in one's own biases or judgments. We're all human. We have those things. When we see somebody right away, we have a certain feeling, but we step outside of it and look at our own feeling and use that as information. Why do we feel that way? This has something to do with the energy of the person that we're working with. That's also cool. In academic philosophy, that's called phenomenology. And the whole trick with finding the truth of a situation is removing all evidence of bias and perspective, so that you can, as much as possible, see the event or the person or the phenomenon in and of itself. And that's I was a philosophy student, and that was very good training for my becoming a homeopath ultimately.
Interesting. And it's so much of it is, you can't tell a book by its cover. And there's so many situations with people that we misconstrue.
Yeah. To that point, Peter, the most important things that I learned from a client is not what they tell me, but what they're not telling me, or what they're struggling not to tell me.
Well, how do you know that?
Oh, that's the expertise of it. Their symptoms are a tell. And sometimes, yeah, you have to sneak it away, but we all have our tells, and there's ways of figuring it out. There's definitely ways of figuring it out.
I
But
guess
that is what we have to find out.
after a while, with so many experiences with people, you can get a feeling of what's missing, what
Yeah,
they
yeah.
should be telling you about, and they're not open to telling you that.
Peter, if they laid it out for you on a plate and put it in front of you, it would be almost meaningless. It's what they can't tell you, what they don't want to tell you, that's important, because that's what's overlaid with shame and guilt. We don't advertise those things. We don't go up to a stranger and tell them what we're ashamed of. We just don't do that. Or what we're most afraid of. No, we spend a lot of energy disguising that, hiding it, or expressing it in our symptoms, our physical symptoms.
But what I'm feeling is that so much of psychotherapy is involved with uncovering these things. They can go on and on and on and on and on in psychotherapy, but you have to work quickly to get to the heart of it. But also, there are different layers too, right? I mean, you'll start off with one remedy, and you'll see how that changes something, and then that'll reflect another remedy that might be useful.
Yeah, you're peeling away states. I like to think that people who've been through psychotherapy a long time, they can have a PhD in themselves, but they're still not going to necessarily get very far. The clients that I see have often defeated their therapists, because the problem is not accessible to just talking therapy. It's something underneath there. And the remedy is like a bomb placed deep in the subconscious that, when it goes off, changes moves the furniture around, or just blows things up, and the dust settles, and the air clears, and it's different. People shift. The issue that pertains to one particular remedy charge, and what's underneath that then comes forward. So it's extremely accelerated psychotherapy, I think. We accomplish things within months that I think can take years and years of really effective psychotherapy.
Wow, that's fascinating. I love that. But it's scary for a lot of people because they're opening the can of worms.
Yeah, management of a case. I mean, I don't find that figuring out the remedy is all that hard, but managing people through these transitions is kind of the bigger charge, because people, as you say, people they go through things, and they need to have their hands held and be reassured, and also kept away from physicians who want to step in there and medicate them for the reactions they're having to the remedies. All those things have to be dealt with by the practitioner.
And that's why I'm glad I'm speaking with someone who has had so many years of experience, to have seen, so many different cases that were problematic in many of these ways we're talking about, and took the effort for you to rise to a higher level. It's fascinating. So we're not quite at the end of the show, but I want people to learn more about you. You've authored a number of books. You have a blog. So what can you tell people?
Yeah, if they go to my website, rightwhalepress.com, you'll see my books. If you go to my Substack newsletter, which is also Right Whale Press Report, you'll see my newsletters on a variety of topics involving mostly homeopathy, and sometimes I talk about nationalism and its discontents. The last two books I've written are pretty popular, but and pretty informative. One is called Sane Asylums, the success of homeopathy before psychiatry lost its mind. And that is a history, a very much needed history of mental hospitals in the United States, which are homeopathically run, that were utopian. And the book which came right after that is more classically a homeopathy book called The Emotional Roots of Chronic Illness, Homeopathy for Existential Stress. And that really fleshes out this idea that I'm promoting, that the remedies all embody existential issues. And existential issues are not just this feeling of, oh my God, we're all going to die, climate change is going to get us, or there's going to be a nuclear war. People who live their lives are always struggling with some existential issue, by which I mean, what's the meaning of my life? What's the meaning of my illness? What's the meaning of my struggle with my partner? What's the connection between this and the symptoms I have? And that's what I like to do with homeopathy. It is one-stop shopping as far as that goes. Loss of face is one aspect of that. If someone has been really wounded, been humiliated or mocked or mortified early in life, and they carry that with them for a long time, that's an existential problem that is expressing itself in their physical symptoms and also the situations that they attract. Okay, I've answered your question. That's a long answer, but that's a book length answer. Is in the book, is the emotional roots of chronic illness, homeopathy for existential stress, and they're both brought out by Simon and Schuster, but they're available through all booksellers, and people should be encouraged to look at those books.
That's great. And how do people get in touch with you?
They can go to my practice website, which is vitalforcehealthcare.com. That would probably be the best way, vitalforcehealthcare.com. And I do a lot of work. I'm still seeing new clients, my schedule allowing, and that's by my Zoom. And people should get ready to embark on an interesting homeopathic voyage. After a good intake, people walk away thinking, my God, that guy knows me better than anybody I've ever met. That's how that person should feel after an hour and a half initial intake. And the remedy that is prescribed and the issue that it contains should deeply resonate with a person.
Right. No, this is fascinating. I mean, I love hearing, so much more about homeopathy. I've known about it a good part of my life and been impressed by it. But just to talk with you and have a feeling of comfort in your experience and expertise about this is wonderful.
Thank you, Peter. You're a terrific interviewer, and you always bring out the best in me, I think.
Well, I'm glad to know that. So thank you so much, Jerry, for being on Energy Stew. I always really enjoy talking with you.
Thank you very much. Feeling is quite mutual, Peter.
Thank you.
Continue doing your great work.
Thanks so much. And this is Peter Roth, your host of Energy Stew at prn.live. I can be reached at peter@heartriver, HEART, river.org. I'd love to hear from you, and thanks so much for listening.